You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Bupp has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Bupp.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is real estate and technology expert Diane Verjik. Now, Diane is the founder and CEO of Waypoint, a cloud-based SaaS platform that connects critical financial data, provides previously unavailable market indices, and automates key financial performance management workflows. Additionally, Waypoint enables real estate investment firms to achieve greater financial and operational performance and attract more capital and talent. Waypoint has a number of industry-leading real estate firms on its platform today and has amassed over $300 billion of assets under management on its platform to date. Now, here's what you're going to learn in our conversation with Diane today. You're going to learn how Diane got her start in real estate while attending medical school. You're going to learn how her passion for real estate ultimately led her away from medical studies and into what she refers to as her purpose in life. You're going to learn about the void that Diane identified within the commercial real estate space that ultimately led her to start Waypoint. We're going to discuss the importance of identifying and understanding critical key performance indicators, KPIs also known as, that are the heart of your business. We're going to discuss how she's been able to attract top-notch talent to her team, even in the high turnover tech world of Silicon Valley, and much, much more. And so with that, guys, I'm excited to get onto the show with Diane. But before we do, I just have a few quick housekeeping items I'd like to run through. First and foremost, this is something new that I'm going to be starting here. Each and every week, I'm going to take a minute to open up to you more on a personal level, okay? This is something that I used to do a great deal of during the first few years of recording this podcast, but for one reason or another, I stopped it. I don't even know why, but at the end of the day, this podcast is really part of my heart and of my soul, and I don't feel like you can fully appreciate the content that me and my guests share unless you have the chance to better get to know me on both a personal level, but also on a professional level, okay? And so with that, each and every week, I'm going to be sharing with you two different things. Number one, it's going to be my one personal best from the prior week. Second is my one professional best from the prior week, okay? And so with that, let's get started. I got a lot of great things going on, okay? There's so many awesome things happening in my life right now. But the one personal best is just this past week, we have an exchange student that came to join us from Poland, okay? This amazing, just brilliant and confident 10-year-old named Peter traveled here all the way from Poland by himself, speaks very little to basically practically no English, came here by himself. It was his idea. He wanted to come here to the States. He wanted to learn English. He wanted to spend a month here and get engulfed in the culture and the language. And so we brought him in. And just imagine that being 10 years old, he flew from Warsaw all the way by himself with a layover in New York down to Florida, and he's going to be spending the next month with us. And it's going to be awesome. It's already been awesome for my family. He's been here with us for a week, and I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. Jackson is my 5-year-old. Julian's my 2-year-old. Both Jackson and Julian do speak Polish. Well, Julian's just starting to speak, but Jackson does speak fluent Polish. For those of you that don't know, my wife is Polish. She was born and raised in Poland and came here when she was 10 years old. She doesn't have much of an accent at all. You would never know that she's Polish, but she does speak fluent Polish and has ingrained that into our two boys as well. And so it's pretty neat watching Peter interact with my oldest son, Jackson, and kind of become part of our family. He's a very responsible 10-year-old, and it's been great having him around. And I think he's having a lot of fun. He's been having a blast, and kids at school and at the camp that he's going to have been really nice to him. So it's just been a great experience having him here, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks of him being a part of our family and to seeing where it goes, right? I hope that this brings a lot of value to both his teenage years, but also his adult life, right? Just having this experience, right? Life is all about these experiences. And the fact that he's 10 years old and he's having this big of an experience is rather awesome. So with that being said, my one professional best from this prior week. Well, I just had the honor of being interviewed on Tom Wheelwright's show. And if you guys don't know who Tom Wheelwright is, he's essentially part of the Rich Dad Network, and he's Robert Kiyosaki's CPA, okay? Tom actually proactively reached out to me with an interest in the mobile home park space, okay? He reached out to me with an interest of having someone on the show that's an expert in mobile home parks. And as you guys know, that is our asset of choice here today. We love the parking lot business, and we consider mobile home parks to essentially be parking lots where we are renting out the dirt lots to folks that want to have their mobile home sitting on those individual lots and pay us rent for it. So Tom actually had the opportunity of reviewing a few of our recent cost segregation studies that we had done on our mobile home communities, and he was absolutely blown away at how we've been able to depreciate as much as 80% of the purchase price on these mobile home parks. And now with the bonus depreciation, we've been able to basically realize that depreciation all in the first year of ownership, which is absolutely amazing. So keep an eye out for that show. It was a lot of fun. Tom was a great host and asked a lot of just very, very amazing questions. And so with that, guys, I want to move on here. If this is the first time that you're tuning into the show, I want to welcome you here to our family here. I do consider each and every one of you as part of my family, our family at the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow podcast. We now have millions upon millions of you that have listened into the different episodes that we've done over the years here. And just want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of it, right? There's lots of other podcasts out there, but you obviously choose to listen to this show. I'm sure you have other ones in your play chart, but this one also is up there as well. And I hope it's at the top of the ranks. I hope you guys look forward to this show each and every Tuesday that it comes out, okay? If you haven't done so already, please take a minute, go over to iTunes, subscribe to the show, and also leave a review and a rating. And I'm working on right now a very special program that's going to be given to you guys as a free gift for taking the time to leave that review and over in iTunes. So you can go ahead and be proactive about it. If you've already left a review and rating, shoot me an email, let me know who you are and what your screen name was. If you have not done so, please go leave that review and rating, and just pay attention on these future episodes that are coming up about this free gift. As soon as I know that you've left a review and rating, I will put you on my list to get this free gift out to you, and I think you're going to be quite impressed with what I'm giving away here. So one other thing I like to do is give a shout out to a listener that's taken the time to go leave a review and rating. So this one is from Ian Ryan, and Ian says, as questions arise during the podcast, Kevin does a great job to answer them immediately. The real estate industry can be confusing, but this podcast helps you navigate it. Excited to keep on listening. So Ian, thank you so much for taking the time to review the show. And so now, guys, without further ado, let's get on to the show. All right, guys, it's my honor to introduce my guest for today's show, real estate and technology expert and founder and CEO of Waypoint, Diane Verjik. Diane, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us here. And you've done a lot over a very short period of time with Waypoint and everything else really in your career. And so I know we chatted a few minutes, Diane, before we started recording here. And I'm very anxious to kind of get into the nitty gritty of Waypoint and the different services that you offer and really how you've been able to add a ton of value to the commercial real estate industry with your software service. So before we get into that though, if you could, you've got quite an extensive background. Maybe take a few minutes, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what led you into this space.
I'd love to. So from a very early age, I think real estate was in my blood. I spent my earliest days in the backseat of my parents' car on the evenings and the weekends looking at multifamily properties in New Jersey. And I think because of that, real estate just became a core part of the way I thought about my life. And as I grew up, I could never really shake that. So the way when I think and experience the world, I really think about it both from a very tactical perspective and, buildings really affect the way I think about my life, the way I feel, the way I think about my workplace and my life. And I could never really escape that. And then my career into real estate, I think wasn't a direct path. I started my career actually thinking I would be a doctor. So I went to medical school and again, just couldn't shake this attraction to the built world. I started my first real estate startup was actually while I was in medical school, a company called Sublet Solutions, where I was helping people sublet their space. And this was a long time ago, but I think the realization of what I was drawn to do and what I was interested in versus what, I thought what would be a good career eventually just geared me to do what I love, to get and to be in real estate. And then my experience in real estate has been pretty comprehensive. So I've worked along the entire spectrum of real estate at this point, and it's been really a wonderful experience. I just feel as though I understand the way investments are made, the way investment portfolios are managed, the strategies associated with being a good investor, and operationally how you can execute to be a good investor. And all of that has really shaped what we're trying to do at Waypoint, but even more importantly, has continued to just deepen my love for the industry and my passion for the space and for working for people that are really building the world of tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And it's been one of the true honors of my life to work in this industry and to work with the folks that we have the pleasure of working with on a daily basis at Waypoint.
That's great. I appreciate you taking the time to give us that background. And that's quite interesting. So you decided you want to go the path of becoming a doctor. During med school, you started a business. I'm looking here at your LinkedIn profile, 96 and 97. So that's, internet was around, but the internet wasn't all that it is today, right? I mean, it was dial-ups, the AOL, the dial-up connection.
Yeah, that sound that none of us can ever forget, right?
I still remember being in the grocery store. Literally, they used to give out the free disc. They'd always have like a thing at the checkout with like the free AOL. You get like a free 100 minutes or 50 minutes, whatever it was. I can't recall, but yeah, that's interesting. So sublet solutions. So that I want to hit on this a little bit because that's kind of the foundation, right? That you had it in your bones. You're sitting in the back seat with your parents as they drive around New Jersey looking at multifamily properties, and so it was ingrained in you, as a little girl, and it never left you. And you're going to med school, pursuing what you thought was your passion, your passion in life. Ultimately, this other burning desire kept, that flame started getting bigger and bigger, kept getting bigger and bigger. And ultimately, you started a real estate business of some sort. Sublet solution. So that's the foundation. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about that. We don't spend too much time there. So this is really about Waypoint and this amazing company that you built there. However, I do love to hear the background story. So if you could maybe give us some better insight to sublet solutions, I think that will kind of pave the way for listeners here today for the rest of the interview together.
Oh, yeah, happy to. It was a long time ago, but I think when I was really young, I was a bit naive in terms of how I thought about my career. I really wanted a career where I could add value, and it wasn't just about me taking value, but how could I give value? And at the 10,000 foot level, there's nothing more altruistic than medicine. So I went into medical school, somewhat not ever really liking medicine, but I really loved the idea of being a doctor. And what I found is, and this is really one of the life lessons that has stayed with me to this day, what you really have to do is you have to find something that you love doing. It can't just be the idea of what you're doing, but it has to be the day-to-day. And while I was in medical school, I just recognized that it wasn't that fun for me. I just didn't have fun, and it felt like work, and it felt like a burden, even though the end outcome is very positive. But the day-to-day wasn't something that I enjoyed. And I finally just gave myself that, and it was really just taking a step back and saying, what am I doing? Like, look at what I actually really enjoy doing. I have this, crazy little thing. We were all, when you're in graduate school or medical school, you're poor for a long period of time. I was in Georgetown paying a lot for rent. We all had to sublet our houses during the summertime. And I just recognized this need, and I thought this would be really wonderful. Like, you could actually use the internet, and it was really early days, but you could use the internet to just allow people to connect, and you could allow people to transact. Mm-hmm. And I think I was just solving my own problem, but it was also a problem that was very tangible to the built environment and something that I had always been interested in. And I just found myself spending more time doing that. And just actually, even the time that I spent doing that, I just enjoyed it. And I, to this day, always encourage people, if you have an interest and you see yourself moving in one direction, just move with that interest. Mm-hmm. If you like something, you could be very good at it, and you need to allow yourself the freedom to do that. And eventually took a leave of absence from medical school. I recognized up until then I had no real idea of technology or how it could be utilized. And then I went to work at Accenture, which is essentially where I got a lot of the foundation that I bring to Waypoint today. But it's really bringing technology applications and solutions to large enterprises to help them perform better. And it was through that experience that I learned technology and then moved that back into real estate, which is, I think, like I mentioned, just always been something that inherently was interesting to me, was inherently exciting. And I've just always seen it as an area that has immense opportunity to really impact people, maybe not as directly as medicine, but indirectly it just changes the way people live and work. Mm-hmm. And when I gave myself the freedom, and it took a while, it's hard to sometimes allow yourself to do just really what you want to do and move forward based upon what you find interesting and exciting. But when I allowed myself to do that, then essentially just the happiness in my life increased, and you could do great things because then you find other people that are interested in what you're interested in, that are motivated in the same way, and you start to essentially find your people. And amongst those people, that group of people, you could really do some pretty incredible things when you're aligned fundamentally on, these values and interest areas and work ethic.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely wonderful. I mean, it really goes back to, find what it is you really enjoy doing in life. Whether it's real estate, you want to be a doctor, if you want to knit rugs or knit blankets, or, you want to be a dog walker, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, if you love animals, if you love being outdoors, whatever it is you love, I mean, you could ultimately turn into a business. It can't really be about the money at first. And that's not that wasn't your reasoning for wanting to be a doctor or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't necessarily money driven, but really find out what it is you enjoy, what gets you excited every day when you wake up, like what has you skipping into the office to do. You figure out whatever that is and follow that path. Even if you have to take a couple steps back initially, I think you'll find that along with the happiness comes the money, right? It's kind of a secondhand nature that ultimately is derived from the happiness portion of it. And it sounds like you found your place, you found your calling. And so I'd love to get on to the topic of Waypoint, because I think that there's lots of things that we can discuss here about what it is you do there, or what Waypoint, what services that it offers the industry. And so I guess first and foremost, the biggest question I would have, Diane, is what was the big void that you identified, or multiple voids, if it's one or many? What was the big void that you identified that ultimately led you to the founding of Waypoint?
The day-to-day, especially when you're young in real estate and throughout your career, what's really interesting about real estate, and my understanding of the industry and the work that is done in the industry has really evolved over time. You normally think about real estate as a brick and mortar company, but real estate companies are really information companies. And essentially, they're really dealing through a currency of brick and mortar, but it's the information flow around investment opportunities, valuations, projections, performance. There's a continuous flow of information around investment assets. And what is really interesting, after a few years, I started to realize all of the work that I was doing and all the work that my colleagues were doing was very similar, right? You're pulling financial information, you're trying to understand your performance, you're trying to pull in market information, you're trying to understand where there's an opportunity to drive value, improve net operating income, improve the assets. You're trying to figure out what the returns could be associated with any investment strategies that you deploy at an asset. And then essentially, no matter what you do, you're trying to track and manage to see how you've done. And what was really interesting to me about real estate is that all of this information is done manually, and it's done on a one-off basis for individual assets. The information is not able to be leveraged in any meaningful way. And the work kind of sucks. Like, it's actually not that fun. The day-to-day of just living your entire being in Excel and just moving numbers and making sure that they've been moved accurately takes a little bit of the joy out of real estate. And I was talking to a chief investment officer for one of the largest funds here in the U.S. It's one of our clients. And he said, we do a great disservice to all the young people in the industry, because not unlike medicine, there's a little bit of you have to earn your ability to do interesting work. You spend the first 10 years or so just moving numbers around spreadsheets and making sure that they're accurate until you get to do more interesting work. And when, I thought back to the kind of work that I was doing at Accenture, organizations have corporate or enterprise performance management platforms. These platforms integrate and pull all of your financial information. They help you develop annual strategies or business plans, and they help track against the performance of those plans, and they make the information available throughout the entire organization. And in real estate, what we had, and the industry did incredible things with 3 systems: an accounting platform, Argus, or potentially Excel for your forecasting, and then Excel to just manage the day-to-day performance of these real estate portfolios. But none of those systems, not one of those systems, was in any way designed to help support or accelerate the day-to-day management of investment portfolios. Now, one of those systems could keep track of information, make sure that it was accurate, make sure that it was being refreshed, make sure that performance, analytics, financial, operational, you name it, was available to the investment professionals that needed it in order to execute their day jobs. And when you look at real estate, what's really interesting, it's not like brain surgery. There's a finite amount of information. There are certain key performance indicators that people really utilize, and they may change slightly depending on the asset class, but it's still, there's very specific pieces of information that people need. And the foundational processes that people use to manage their investment portfolios are extraordinarily similar. And there are these key processes essentially that are foundational to how people manage their real estate assets. And essentially, when in taking a step back, technology could be applied essentially to those problems in order to create a much better modern experience for all of the investment professionals that are in real estate. So we always say, we like to get people to the starting line instead of everybody spending 40% of their time actually trying to get to the starting line. We imagine this world where information is connected, all of the individuals in a real estate company and all of their partners are connected, and these core financial management or asset management, portfolio management, whatever you want to call it, these core activities that are part and parcel to the way investment portfolios are managed are really automated. And what you have is essentially just a modern way to work. I think the expectation that younger people have around how many years they'll, stick it out doing all this grunt work is somewhat changing. I also think, a lot of executives are changing their opinion about that. People want to enable their teams to be successful. They want to enable their people to be happy. I think it's hard to attract and retain talent in today's world. And I think starting to, think about ways to empower teams has been, oddly enough, a really big motivator for many of our clients, which is really wonderful. I think real estate in general is moving to a different age and place where these things really matter. And we're seeing some pretty dramatic and tremendous movements by organizations to essentially tech enable the way they manage their investment portfolios and the way they enable their teams to drive increased efficiency and productivity and just overall happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you make some valid points there. It's interesting that, you bring up about how it's not fun, burying your head into an Excel file and just into data on a day in, day out basis, 8 hours a day. And, just the sheer grunt work about it. There are a few weird people in this world that truly enjoy that, but I don't think that's the majority. One of my partners is one of those guys. I think he gets excited whenever he's got Excel in hand and just really enjoys the data manipulation point and can spend hours upon hours in there and leaves with a smile on his face, which is so odd to me. But in any event, I think it really goes back to the delay in the industry making a big shift. And obviously you guys have been kind of that disruptor. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a really good friend of mine that he's about 10 years older than I am. He works for Goldman Sachs, and he got with Goldman Sachs, right out of school. And, some of the senior executives, they basically expected, for like the first 5 years that literally you should be sleeping underneath your desk at least 3 out of the 5 days of the week. Like there's no reason why you should be at least going home anytime before like midnight, any given night. And was there more production, made because of that? Probably not, right? There was probably a more efficient way to run that portion of the organization. And it sounds like Waypoint is offering that solution for the commercial real estate industry, a way to add some efficiency to a space that someone operated like a dinosaur, in the not so distant past. So
And it worked for a lot of years, right? I kind of smile because all of these organizations needed and relied on people that could do that. And I think that it's still foundational. Real estate is an information business, and it's about numbers, and it's about understanding those numbers, and it's about making decisions off of those numbers. I think what's happening now is these portfolios are getting much larger. They're getting more complex. There's more distributed, but people are dealing with more asset classes. It's not as regional or local as it was when it started. And I think the impact of that, and the impact of the fact that we're in a pretty competitive time in the cycle, I think the way people have to look at values, the way they have to analyze information, the way they have to get ahead of the curve is changing. And some of this foundational grunt work, to the extent that it could be automated, what could that person be capable of if they weren't actually just pulling accounting reports and spending a lot of their time just making sure that they had the right financials in place? What happens if they all had that and then they were actually looking at other information? What are the demographic changes? What asset classes should we be moving into? How do we look at different investment opportunities? How do we think about our tenants? How do we get more information from them? How do we expand the value associated that we can create within an asset that is outside of just tenant rents? All of these things are now starting to happen. And when you have wonderful, exceptional people, you need to enable them to be thinking above and beyond. So you're continuously driving value in ways that your competitors are not. And all this grunt work and just like taking the best people, folks that work at Goldman. I mean, you name all of these real estate investment firms. These are exceptionally bright people. And what should we be tasking them with? What should we be enabling them with? And it shouldn't be calling their accountant to get, Excel spreadsheets of financials and trying to manipulate that. It should be about looking at the future, trying to predict the future and move into the future before other people are doing that. So it's still about data information. It's just about enabling people to start doing analysis that is much more forward thinking as opposed to just a lot of the backward thinking. That it's essential. It's essential. We're just moving into a different world, and there are tools now that I think will enable people to be much more productive and just add a lot more interesting analysis, interesting investment decisions that really could be enabled through the use of technology as an enabler.
Let me ask you this, Diane. Where are you guys pulling all the data from that's essentially ending up in your software? I mean, do you guys have an open API platform, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we do. Essentially, there's like 3 foundational value propositions associated with our product, which is essentially a portfolio performance management product. So it's built especially for real estate. And then it has these 3 value propositions. So the first, it's a modern open platform that's used to manage all of the critical information for a real estate investment shop. So we have an API, and we integrate with all of the core sources of truth, essentially. So all of the accounting platforms that are used to support real estate, we integrate with Argus. We can integrate with additional point solutions that are being used to help support workflows on the leasing side or potentially on the project management side. But essentially, we pull all that information in, and we can pull it in. Real estate's very interesting. There's a lot of different capital and organizational structures in place. You could have 50% of your portfolio is direct investments. The other 50% is through JVs. We can integrate across all of those essentially systems, pull all the information in, and then we've created the back end system that can aggregate, normalize, enable you to view all of your financials in essentially the way you want to see them. And the system essentially is set up to manage that flow of information, but not just manage it, but also ensure that the data is healthy and is accurate. And then secondly, just on the rest of the value proposition. So one, it's about getting all of your information together, all of your critical information in one place, but then it's about opening up all of that information to everybody in your organization. So we provide on-demand performance insight across your entire organization, and it's both up and down the capital and operating stack. So if you have joint venture partners that you want on the platform so that they could see the performance of those particular assets, not a problem. It also allows you to just have a much better experience with across the capital stack with other partners in those buildings, which is extremely important because, we're living in the modern world. And then secondly, depending on how you're organized, if you're vertically integrated or if you have third-party property managers, these still are all people that are a part of your team and need to have access to performance information. So we open that up across the entire organization. And then lastly, when you look at the information that we're pulling, there are these core foundational processes that real estate is built upon, whether it's managing your actuals to budgets and facilitating that reporting, whether it's the annual business plan, developing, agreeing on that plan, aligning the team against that plan and executing that plan, whether it's forecasting and trying to pull in information to give you better insights on how you should forecast. But there are these foundational work that is being done across the board somewhat pretty similarly. And what we've done is we've automated the way that work is done in a way that enables, every investment professional needs to have all the information about every one of their investments at their fingertips. They can do that within Waypoint. And then they can essentially have a system that's also working to support some of the work around tracking, managing, identifying when things are not working according to plan, and just allowing for there to be a system that is essentially becomes the system of record for your day-to-day performance management. So why did you make this decision? What were all the reasons that, a certain decision was made at a particular asset? That kind of information today is just really gets lost. And when people walk out the door, a lot of times they walk out with a lot of that information. And the system essentially is meant to solve essentially that problem and really create a modern day-to-day platform that can be used to facilitate the day-to-day management of investment portfolios. And that's what we've done. And it's more exciting every day. I think our clients see what we have done and see where we're going. And they're as excited about us in regard to the future of what we can do. Because I made this comment earlier, I think people are realizing that it's time to the extent that you can empower your people do want to do that. The world is changing, and I think we're all changing with it in a really healthy and intentional way.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I wanted to ask before I forget, it's on top of mind right now about Waypoint. We've got a varying size of, real estate operators that listen into the show. Anyone from, maybe owning one commercial piece of property to owning a fairly large portfolio, and then everything in between. And so give me an idea of what your ideal client size is. I mean, would the individual that owns, 3 multifamily properties, maybe a total of, 500 doors, is that kind of too small for them to consider utilizing your platform?
What's really interesting for us, and I think what we've recognized, is that we drive a lot of value for the larger investment portfolios because it's very difficult for those folks to get all of the information that they need normalized across all of their different systems and partners. And we drive tremendous value for those folks just because of the volume of information and the difficulty associated with bringing all of that information into one place in an automated way. But what is really has been wonderfully, I don't want to say surprising, but the uptake that we have from much smaller investors that have a handful of assets has been really surprising to me, especially over this last year. And when I look at the problems that we're solving for them, so one, those groups are much leaner. I think they want to essentially set up the right processes in place that can allow them to scale more efficiently. I think they have less people, and anything that we can do to help them essentially automate and manage processes that decrease the effort on their investment professionals so they can be out doing deals and continuing to essentially drive improvement has been a big driver to much smaller portfolios coming on to Waypoint. The other thing what's really interesting is fast-growing companies really like to use Waypoint. I think they see this as an enabler to enabling them to scale quickly without actually continuing to have to add a lot of instead of throwing bodies to the problem, they could have a system and then essentially as they're scaling their team, be scaling a different type of individual that can be driving value, not just be managing information. And lastly, I think, people are always trying to raise capital I think they need to look good to the capital sources. I think there's an acknowledgement and a realization that, the way most folks have been running their portfolios historically has been without any use of tools, and I think the insight or the lack there of insight that happens if you don't have an easy way to essentially manage your information or your portfolio exists. So what's really interesting is some of these smaller, faster growing companies also utilize our platform to essentially help them create a differentiator when they're raising capital. So I think all of these things are happening at the same time. And what we're seeing is, I think foundationally, people, to the extent that you could have better information, faster information available to everybody in your organization, including the executives, for their use in attracting capital, doing better deals, attracting employees, to essentially just driving much better operational improvements for your team. We're seeing that holistically, I think, being adopted both by large organizations or by really small organizations. So, and what's happened for us is we have essentially clients that have just a handful of properties on our platform, but have aspirations to grow and have aspirations to essentially not have their people doing a lot of painful work, to the largest companies that believe that they can start utilizing all of this information in ways that can really dramatically change and enhance the kind of strategies that they're putting into place from an investment perspective across their portfolios. And we're seeing somewhat similar movement towards the adoption of technology across that entire spectrum of investors and portfolios.
No, it's a beautiful thing. It's absolutely a beautiful thing. I think you make a lot of valid points there, and I want to be respectful of your time too, Diane. There's a couple of other questions I definitely want to cover here before we run out of time, and so I'm gonna ask, if you wouldn't mind. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here. I'm admiring I'm on the Waypoint website. I'm admiring your team, this talent that you have built over a few short years. The question I have regarding Waypoint and your team there that you've been able to attract in-house is just that. Any advice that you could give the folks that are listening in that are maybe in a scaling enterprise here today? Maybe they're just getting their feet wet. They've got a few team members, but ultimately you have a vision of grandeur, of growing into a large real estate investment firm. But obviously to grow into scale, you need to attract the right talent, the top talent. Like you don't shop by price when it comes to growing your team and finding the best talent, right? How does someone, or what advice would you give someone that's out there on the hunt today that wants to attract just that rock star to their organization? And any feedback you might be able to give?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's one I actually think about a lot. So we're in San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco from the East Coast when I wanted to start a technology company, because this is where the best technology talent was. And it is one of the toughest places to attract and retain talent. And I truly believe we have the best technology company in real estate tech that exists in the United States. And I think often about how that has happened in the toughest labor market. It feels like the toughest labor market in the U.S., if not the world. And I think there's just a couple of really basic things. I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. And it sounds pretty simplistic, but I think if you do that, I think trust is really important amongst a small team, and people have to be able to trust each other. And the first thing you have to do as part of that is be able to put your ego down and, be honest. Try to be as honest as you possibly can on a daily basis with the team around you so that you can develop that trust. And then when you have that kind of trust, it just enables people to flourish, right? Because in a small company, there's no way you could micromanage people. If somebody needs micromanaging, you're just not the right kind of fit. And then secondly, I think I thought a lot about the composition of our team and how we've been able to develop the team that we do. And this is a realization that came to be after the fact, because I've often wondered how it is that I get to work with the people that I do on a daily basis. And there's a common thread amongst the people at Waypoint. I think people can be extrinsically motivated or they can be intrinsically motivated. And the common thread at Waypoint is that folks are really intrinsically motivated. So folks that are extrinsically motivated just want money, they want fame, they want attention, and they do things in order to seek that. The people at Waypoint, I think when you're intrinsically motivated, folks really take pride in their work here. they're craftsmen at what they do. They are really driven to be the best that they can be. And I think there are those qualities that seem to be inherent in the way we built our team. So what's happened is we've created a team of people that want to be the best that they can be. And because of that, they want feedback, they want collaboration, they communicate with each other. They're trying to help each other continuously as perfect their skills and perhaps perfect their craft. Mm-hmm. And what we've created is just a culture that really allows for that. And I think in San Francisco, there's just so much competition for talent. But when people walk in the door, we don't have any problem hiring people. I think they can automatically feel that nature here and that culture here. And it's self-reinforcing because we just keep attracting and hiring people that are like that. So now it's built this culture that is powerful. And then the added benefit of that is that, there's not micromanaging. There are not these, sort of old school management techniques that you have to apply, because here people trust themselves. They acknowledge when there was a problem. They work with each other to solve those problems. It's created what I think is a really healthy place. And I think that that's actually really hard to do in any kind of labor market. And I laugh because I think, well, we're in San Francisco, the toughest labor market, but people walk in here and they sense that about us and they want to work here. Mm-hmm. So we're able to use it as a differentiator in San Francisco, where people sometimes have to, invest in like pool tables and, ping pong tables. Yeah. And an arcade in their office, or, where I don't think that's not the selling point. That's not what we try to win people on.
Yeah.
At Waypoint. Yeah.
The funny thing is I get that. And my guess is that a majority of the offices that have that type of stuff, that stuff just collects dust. It probably doesn't get used all that often. It looks cool, right? It looks cool. And I understand the idea behind it. But ultimately, yeah, the last thing I'm going to go do is go tap a beer in the middle of the day while I'm working, or, get a ping pong.
I know.
Maybe, who knows? But anyway. So you made a comment regarding, I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit, but you made a comment regarding, when you're a smaller team, you can't micromanage. Like if you have to hire somebody, you have to micromanage them, then they're probably not the right fit. And I think that's a critical point, especially when a company is in the initial growing stages. I mean, talking about from being the founder to hiring like those first, 1, 2, or 3 key team members, right? Like the important cogs of the wheel. Like you've got to make the right hires right out of the get-go. Like you can't fail there, or else your foundation is going to fall apart underneath you. I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, going back in time to when you founded Waypoint, what did those first initial key hires look like? I mean, were they carrying their own weight? I mean, were they the essential cogs in the wheel that helps you propel forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's so critical because I think if you don't make the right hires early on, it's very hard to get off the ground. And I think there's a couple of characteristics. It's always hard to know, right, during the interview process, but I think you have to really look at the person. One, are they interested in what you're doing? Mm-hmm. Like what kind of interest do they have? They have to be passionate about the space. And if you're not really interested in the space, you're going to be doing what I was doing in medicine, which is like having all these side projects around the work that I was actually interested in. So they have to really fundamentally just really be interested in the problem that you're solving. The second thing is they just have to have good judgment. I mean, that's something that, I think you just have to ask them questions around their past and why they made certain decisions. When they made a mistake, why was it a mistake? How did they evolve past that? And that the judgment part, I think, becomes pretty clear after working with someone for a few months, whether or not they really have good judgment. And when they do, you just don't have to worry about the decisions that they're making or manage those decisions. And that's critical. So I think that's something that, one, you have to try to understand the person and their history, their decision making, but also as they start as an early team member, really understand if they're able to bring that kind of thoughtfulness to the way that they look at their jobs and the way that they make decisions. And then lastly, there's one category which is essentially for all good qualities that you want your fellow team members to have. I mean, a high sense of integrity. I think nothing works unless people can be honest, and they can't be honest unless they are competent and confident and have that moral backbone.
Well, good deal, Diana. You've shared a lot of great information with us here today. Really appreciate you coming to the show and lots of golden nuggets to be had. However, before we say goodbye to one another, if you just had one final golden nugget of advice or wisdom that you could leave with our listeners today that may inspire and motivate them as they progress in their real estate investing career, what would that one last golden nugget be?
When I think about my life, and I had heard somebody say this once, and it's always rang true to me, life really isn't as risky as you think it is. I think there's a lot of time that's spent thinking about what you want to do or how you could move your life into a place that feels like could be really rewarding. And I think sometimes just human beings are inclined to look at the future, and when they evaluate risk, to really look at the downside. But there's also just significant upside. And I think when I look at my life and when I, give advice to people that are thinking about their careers or things that they want to do, I just go back to the realization that life is not as risky as you think it is. You have to move in the direction that where your heart and your interests lie, and then things actually do just work themselves out. I think to the extent, reputation really matters. I think that's at the end of the day, that's all any of us have. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that you can, be as authentic as you can, that's really meaningful. And I feel like that's just easier done when you move your life in the direction associated with where your interest lies, where your heart lies, and where your passions and capabilities lie. And then that ability to just be yourself becomes much easier. That ability to have people know you and think highly of you, I think, increases as well when you're able to put yourself in those environments. So, if you are thinking about doing something and you're hesitating, I think there's an upside and a downside to not moving and not doing the things that you want to do. And it's no different from the upside and the downside associated with moving your life and taking some risks. So you just have to go for it. The only thing that I think what really bothers me is to have regret. And I think that's, I don't want to live my life with a lot of regret. So I'd rather live my life with a lot of failure or bumps but I think your chances of actually having a real happiness, having real success, working with people that you love and that you enjoy, I think that the likelihood of that being the outcome is much higher if you move than if you don't move on things.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not growing if we're not failing. And so, telling the story to your children, to your friends or grandchildren, what have you, of a failure and ultimately what the outcome, the positive outcome, whether it be, days following, years following, that came of that failure, the lessons learned. It's much easier to talk about much more of an exciting story than the regrets of all the things that you didn't do. Ultimately, again, if you're not failing on a daily basis one way or another, then you're surely not growing as an individual, as a business person, spiritually, emotionally. I mean, all the above. I mean, it should become part of your daily habit. And it surely is mine. And we try to ingrain that in all of our team staff and employees here as well. And it's not a failure, it's a lesson, but really the important part of that is like, what can you extract? Sit back and what can you pull away from that negative experience that ultimately, will turn into a positive experience and help you, continue your growth pattern. So, well, Diane, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us here. And for folks that want to learn more about Diane and Waypoint and all the different services that they offer the commercial real estate industry, they can visit her website, waypointbuilding.com. Again, waypointbuilding.com. And Diane, thank you for coming on the show. And thank you to everyone for tuning into this week's episode. And until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, signing off.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com. And we'll see you next Monday morning.